The Bible talks about a few people who were indeed blessed. Let me give you a glimpse and some highlights from the life of them and ask this question. Honestly answer this question. Will you consider them as blessed people? Will your definition of blessedness change as a result of that? Number one, Abraham, a man who lived mostly a nomadic life, wandering pilgrim kind of a life. He had to wait till old age even to have a son. Most of his time he lived in tents, lived like a pilgrim. He said he was looking for a city with foundations, a lasting city whose builder and architect is God himself. He could not find it anywhere. And he carried on with an aching restlessness, yet full of hope. He struggled. He was tested. He was proven faithful, even the most costly offering of this son, Isaac. Will you consider his life blessed? Second, Moses, born in an Israelite slave home in Egypt. Many a time, his life was under threat. Providentially, he was placed in a palace for a short while. Displaced to a wilderness life. Privilege of talking to God face to face. Choose to suffer the reproach of Christ in the wilderness with the people of God than the riches of Egypt. Wandered in the wilderness on a mission of taking a chosen people of 600,000 men or families to the promised land, of which in this whole endeavor, only 2 of them could finally survive the wilderness. He could not even take them to the final destination. Neither could he enter, but could see it only from the top of Pisgah, only from a distance. Will this man be considered as a failure in the eyes of the world? There was no monument or even a tombstone. There was no fanfare. Nobody knew about his death and burial. Often carried the weight of leadership to the extent of even crushed by it, but certified by God as the meekest man on earth. What a blessed life. Will you consider this one blessed? Mary, the mother of Jesus. I'm just giving you some glimpses. She is considered as the most blessed woman. What did this actually mean to her? She was born in a poor family, stressful times of a teenage pregnancy with many looking upon her with suspicion and wagging their heads. Many people actually told her she was the most blessed person. Though Simeon, you remember that old man, he prophesied that a sword will pierce her heart. She lived a life of poverty, could offer only turtle doves and not a lamb for the sacrifice when Jesus, the little child, was brought into the temple. Her husband died at a very young age. She saw her firstborn crucified in front of her eyes. The other children at that point, they were not even very godly. She was received into a relative's house for future care. She saw the birth of the church. Are these the mark of blessedness? What a blessed life. The most blessed woman on earth. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, born in a carpenter's home, served as a carpenter, lived in poverty and mostly in others' homes, often walking on dusty roads. And he said, the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. He died on a cross, a cursed death, buried in a borrowed tomb. He taught, more blessed to give than to receive. Quoted in Acts 20, verse 35. Jesus' philosophy of life. It is more blessed to give than to receive. He's often quoted as a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, but anointed with the oil of gladness. How blessed was he? Number 5, Apostle Paul. Yes, the life of Paul. The doctrine of material blessings, he is countering in 2 Corinthians chapter 10 to 12 when we read. He's countering the doctrine of material blessings. In fact, if you look at a summary of 2 Corinthians, that whole book seemed to be written in this kind of a context, the material blessing and the prosperity and the success narratives. Many people in ministry were comparing Paul with themselves. The way he lived and moved around, it was very obvious that Paul had no blessing in his life in their eyes. He voluntarily chose to live a life of poverty than acquiring wealth through sordid gain. He preferred to work hard with his own hands and support others than receive even that which was rightful. 2 Timothy 4:13 describes that he lived in utter poverty, often hungry and in cold exposure, as 2 Corinthians 11:27. That tells it all. The senior apostle, the super apostle, this mighty man of God, often hungry and in cold exposure, didn't have enough warm clothes to cover himself. The super apostle spent the final days of his life in loneliness in the Mamertine prison in Rome, hungry, shivering, lonely before he was executed. Indeed, he was penniless. It made many rich. Most of the other disciples lived similar lives. Were they blessed people? Think about it. Will my understanding and paradigm of blessing, my definition of blessing, or the narrative circulated in the Christian world as the narrative of blessing, does any of these people fit into that narrative